I didn't move to Crystal Ridge Lake for drama, I moved to get away from it. After 20 years serving on the force, the last 10 with SWAT, I'd seen enough chaos to last a lifetime. Drug busts, hostage rescues, high-speed pursuits, my retirement. The gift to myself was a log cabin on 2 acres of pine-wrapped freedom, just me, my daughter Alyssa, and the sound of loons skimming the lake at sunrise. No sirens, no paperwork. No nonsense, at least. That was the plan. It started with a flyer. Found it folded under a rock on my gate. Welcome to the Ridge Lake HOA Preserving Order, one home at a time. Beneath that cheerful slogan was a list of visual compliance expectations, including things like mailbox uniformity and exterior paint colors. My mailbox, handmade cedar with iron rivets. My cabin, raw pine logs with an American flag mural on the side, so, naturally, I ignored it. The next day I got a second notice, this time duct taped to my truck windshield, then a third wedged into the frame of my front door like a parking ticket. All of them bore the same signature, S. Crowley, HOA Compliance Officer. I chuckled the first time. By the third, I started watching my cameras. That's when I saw him. He rolled up in an old Crown Vic with tinted windows and appealing Ridge Lake. HOA magnet slapped on the side like an afterthought. Guy stepped out wearing cargo boots, aviators, and a tactical vest with a shiny silver badge that looked more costume shop than official issue. Stephen Crowley, he announced, walking like he expected me to salute. You're in violation of Ridge Lake HOA Code 14B, unauthorized structure exterior and flag display. I'm here to issue a citation. I stared at him from the porch, one hand resting casually on the railing. You lost. This land's outside HOA jurisdiction. Survey records are public. Crowley smirked. That's where you're wrong, sir. The HOAS expanded its boundary map. You'll want to attend the next compliance meeting or face escalation. Let me be real clear, I said, stepping down the stairs. You come onto my property again, fake badge or not, and that will escalate. He didn't flinch, just adjusted his sunglasses like a cartoon villain and turned back toward his car. You'll regret this, he muttered. I watched him drive off, gravel crunching under his tires, and felt something shift in my gut. This wasn't your everyday HOA busybody. This was someone playing cop with a god complex. That night, I installed 2 extra motion sensors and moved Alyssa's room farther from the front-facing windows, not because I was afraid, but because my instincts were rarely wrong. And Crowley had the look of a man who believed rules didn't apply to him. That made him dangerous the next morning. I found drone footage of my cabin posted anonymously in a Ridge Lake community forum. The comments were disturbing. This guy's trashing the aesthetic. Someone needs to make him comply. Can we get Crowley to send a crew? I dug deeper. Turns out Stephen Crowley wasn't officially listed on the HOA board. He wasn't listed anywhere. In fact, no official title, no job description, just a self-appointed compliance enforcer who'd taken it upon himself to find, intimidate, and harass anyone who didn't fall in line with his vision of order. The HOA let him, or worse, they encouraged it. Neighbors were scared. One elderly couple down the road had their generator cables mysteriously severed after refusing to change their door color. Another family's tires were slashed after filing a complaint about unauthorized surveillance. Crowley was turning this place into his own little dictatorship, and now he had his eyes on me. I'd spent a career dealing with men who pushed boundaries to see who pushed back. They always made the same mistake, thinking intimidation worked on everyone. Crowley hadn't met me yet. 3 days passed without another visit, but peace has a way of feeling counterfeit when you know it's temporary. I kept a sidearm holstered during yard work and left a trail cam facing the tree line. Alyssa didn't ask questions. She grew up watching me come home bruised and guarded. She knew what silence could mean. That Sunday, I was chopping kindling near the edge of the property when I heard tires crunching over gravel again. I expected Crowley's Crown Vic. Instead, it was worse. 4 black SUVs rolled in like a convoy. Windows tinted darker than legal. No plates. They stopped just beyond my drive, engines still running, as if daring me to ask why. Crowley emerged first, his tactical vests zipped high and smugness higher. But this time he wasn't alone. 3 men climbed out behind him, large, quiet, and unsettlingly synchronized. Each wore black polos, utility belts, and mirrored sunglasses. Their boots were military grade. One of them carried a rifle case. Another wore gloves in the middle of summer. I set the axe down slowly and walked to the edge of the lawn. Crowley raised his chin. We gave you time to comply. Now we're here to enforce. I didn't move. Enforce what? The Ridge Lake HOA has extended enforcement directive. You're in violation. Your residence is subject to conditional seizure until remediation. He said it like he was reading off a court order, but his words were hollow. No legal authority. No signatures. Just bravado and a costume. You're trespassing, I said calmly. You brought muscle to intimidate a civilian on private land. That's a felony if you're armed. One of the goons stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. You gonna call the sheriff, old man? I don't need the sheriff, I replied. Then I tapped the mic clipped beneath my flannel collar. Mark 1, you copy. Silence. Then a voice crackled in my ear. Copy. We've got eyes. Crowley's confidence faltered for a split second, but he masked it with a sneer. I took a slow breath, measuring the scene. These men weren't amateurs. They carried themselves with the muscle memory of people who had once followed orders with lethal precision and now acted without them. "I'm giving you one chance," I said. "You leave now, and this ends quietly." Crowley stepped closer. "Too close. You think you're above the rules because you're some retired badge. That cabin isn't exempt just because you say it is." I met his stare. "I didn't say it. The land deed says it. The county map says it. The charter says it. You just have a clipboard and a fantasy." He growled something under his breath. Behind him, the largest of the three men unzipped the rifle case. I didn't flinch. Crowley reached for his fake badge like it meant something. "This is your final warning." That's when the wind shifted and the distant whoop-whoop-up of a helicopter echoed through the valley. The men froze. Crowley's eyes flicked skyward. Then behind me where 4 silhouettes were emerging from the tree line, moving like shadows. Tactical gear, real insignia, real weapons. "County SWAT, hands in the air," barked Marcus, my old team lead. "Drop all gear. Down on your knees, now." Crowley turned ghost pale. One of his hired hands actually whimpered. The takedown was clean. Surgical. Crowley tried to protest, but the moment Marcus held up a copy of the actual property boundary map and HOA charter, the lies collapsed like a house of wet cards. Turns out Crowley had used Photoshop to doctor the maps and create fake enforcement extensions. He had convinced the HOA board that new properties were under their umbrella, when they weren't, and he didn't stop there. He started recruiting. According to records found in his vehicle, he paid 2 former PMC dropouts and a disgraced ex-parole officer to act as his compliance enforcers. They weren't just bullying people, they were extorting them. Fines, property liens, even threats of forced removal. And I wasn't their first target. Just the first one, ready as they were zip-tied and loaded into cruisers. Marcus walked over. "Jaw tight, you always did attract the weird ones," he muttered. "Comes with the territory," I said. "You think the HOA was in on it?" He gave a dry laugh. "Oh, we're about to find out." I looked back at Alyssa, who was watching from the porch, safe behind the reinforced glass. "This isn't over yet," I said, and I meant it. By Monday morning, the story had begun to unravel, and not in silence. The local sheriff's office issued a statement confirming the arrest of Stephen Crowley and his so-called compliance squad on multiple charges: impersonating law enforcement, conspiracy to commit extortion, and unlawful surveillance. But that was just the surface. The real rot ran deeper. I spent the next 2 days assisting Marcus and his team, providing footage from my security system, copies of the HOA flyers, and even screenshots from the Ridge Lake forum. Every file painted the same picture. Crowley didn't act alone. Behind his antics was a trail of silent nods and lookaways. Emails recovered from Crowley's laptop told the story no one on the HOA board wanted told. Several members, including HOA President Marla Brenner, had been fully aware of his special enforcement division. One message dated just 3 weeks prior. "Read, if he can get that stubborn cabin guy to comply, the rest will fall in line." Another board member had written, "Crowley's methods are aggressive, but necessary. We need uniformity." Uniformity. That word again. They worshipped it. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. The Ridge Lake HOA had become a private regime, and my refusal to join their little empire had made me the enemy. Meanwhile, neighbors I barely knew began showing up. There was Greg from down the slope. His fence had been painted over by volunteer enforcers after he refused to pay for an HOA-approved stain. Lisa, a single mom 3 houses away, said her driveway had been vandalized after she parked a trailer for one weekend. No one had ever come forward, but they all suspected Crowley. And now their stories flowed freely. Fear had held their voices hostage, but now the dam had broken. I met with the county's assistant district attorney that Thursday. She was young, sharp, and visibly furious. "Crowley is a parasite," she said. "But parasites need a host, and this HOA fed him." I slid a flash drive across her desk. 17 residents, statements, photos, footage. "You'll find it all." She nodded, her jaw tight. "We're building a case for criminal negligence against the board. This won't be a slap on the wrist." I liked her. By week's end, subpoenas hit the Ridge Lake HOA like thunderclaps. The board scrambled. Marla resigned publicly but tried to downplay everything, claiming she had no knowledge of Crowley's actions. That defense didn't hold up for long. An HOA expense report surfaced, detailing payouts labeled private enforcement stipends and security deterrence bonuses, all tied back to a fund Marla managed. Turns out she'd been redirecting HOA fees to fund Crowley's operations under the guise of beautification initiatives. That phrase had been a blanket for everything from spy drones to intimidation bonuses. The more we uncovered, the worse it got. Crowley's enforcers weren't just threatening people. They had bank records showing fines paid directly to a private account. Over $74,000 extorted from frightened residents in just under a year. No one had fought back. Until now. Alyssa and I kept things quiet at the cabin. Still, there was a shift. In the airless sphere, more resolve. Greg and Lisa organized a community meeting, the first not sanctioned by the HOA. 50 people showed up. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. My presence was enough. They'd seen what happened when someone stood their ground. Then came the letter. It was hand-delivered by a courier, official-looking envelope, gold seal on the flap. Inside was a formal statement from the HOA board, or what was left of it, declaring that my property had been reviewed and acknowledged as outside HOA authority, and that any prior attempts at enforcement were made in error and without official sanction. I laughed. A tidy little bow to wrap up a firestorm of illegal intimidation. But it wasn't about the apology. It was about precedent. They wanted the whole thing to disappear, sweep Crowley under the rug, and spin the board's involvement as a misunderstanding. Not on my watch. I forwarded the letter to the district attorney's office. By the end of the week, a judge issued a temporary injunction suspending the Ridge Lake HOA board and freezing its accounts pending investigation. Crowley sat in county lockup without bail. Marla lawyered up in Ridge Lake. It was learning to breathe again, but the war wasn't quite over. Something still lingered, something unfinished, and I wasn't the kind of man to leave things undone. The dust didn't settle at SMOLDERED. The Ridge Lake HOA, once a smug overseer of rules and visual compliance, had imploded under the weight of its own corruption. And still, I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. The cleanup had only just begun. The interim board was appointed by the county court, a collection of reluctant volunteers and one retired attorney who knew enough to keep things legal. They froze all enforcement actions, halted collections, and opened a public comment forum. It was meant to be a gesture of goodwill. But some gestures come too late. I didn't attend the first meeting, but Alyssa did. She sat in the back, quiet, but alert. Later that night she told me what she saw. They were scared, Dad, she said, not of you, of each other. No one trusts anyone anymore. Good. That meant the illusion had shattered. But then came the surprising part. She handed me a folded paper, no envelope. Just my name scrawled across the front in shaky CURSIVE. That it was from Paul Whitaker, a soft-spoken man in his 70s who lived at the edge of the HOA line. I'd barely spoken to him once. You didn't just stand up to them, the note read. You reminded the rest of us that we still could. Beneath the message was a photograph, black and white, faded at the edges, a much younger Paul, standing proudly next to his first home, same land, same outline, but without the fences, restrictions, or beige paint. He'd lived here before the HOA was ever formed. That changed something in me. It wasn't just about Crowley. It wasn't about me either. It was about a community that had been quietly bullied into obedience, taught to fear nonconformity, and stripped of the freedom that made this land worth calling home in the first place. It was about remembering that ownership didn't end at the property line. It extended into the right to be without permission. So I did one final thing. I sent a letter, formal, notarized, and very public, to the new interim board, the sheriff's office, and the county zoning commissioner. In it, I made clear that I would be filing suit against the Ridge Lake HOA for harassment, trespassing, emotional distress, false citations, and the attempted unlawful seizure of private land. I didn't want money. I wanted three things. 1. A permanent declaration from the county land office reaffirming that my parcel and others outside the HOA boundary would never be subject to future annexation without explicit written consent. Criminal prosecution for all board members found complicit in Crowley's operation. 3. A formal recorded apology from the HOA to every resident whose rights had been violated. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. The legal process took months, but by spring the court had ruled in our favor. The Ridge Lake HOA's authority was permanently reduced and legally restrained. Marla pled guilty to conspiracy to defraud and was sentenced to 18 months. Crowley got 5 years, plus restitution. Most satisfying of all, the residents voted to dissolve the HOA altogether, replacing it with a voluntary neighborhood council, focused on cooperation, not control. My cabin stayed just the way I liked it: log beams, flag mural, and a hand-carved sign posted at the gate: private property, no trespassing, HOA free zone. Alyssa painted the lettering herself, added a small pine tree insignia in the corner, just her little touch of rebellion. Life slowed again, in the right ways. Mornings were for coffee and trail walks, evenings for fire pits and guitar strings. My neighbors, they were no longer silent. We waved, we spoke, we shared. Not because anyone demanded it, but because we could. And that, more than anything, was the point. One afternoon, as I was stacking firewood, Marcus stopped by, off duty this time, in jeans and a ball cap. You ever think about coming back? He asked, half joking. I shook my head. I've done my time. He looked out over the ridge toward the houses below. Funny, still feels like you're protecting people. I didn't answer. Just gave a small nod. Sometimes protection didn't come with sirens or badges. Sometimes it came with standing your ground. With saying, no more, and meaning it.